I go out into the mainstream media or even technology platforms right now, I won't see what we just saw. I won't see hundreds of doctors saying that the vaccination agenda in the next 12 months is a bad idea. And I'm just curious if maybe you can talk, and maybe we can even ask the panel to get their thoughts on the censorship that's happening. Maybe you can tell me why you think it's happening and why it's almost complete across the board. You know, when I started even mentioning the word vaccination, I got shut down more than when I started questioning the classification of COVID-19 deaths, than when I started talking about potential technology like 5G exacerbating the immune system. It's the vaccination that was completely shut down. So maybe you can speak on censorship, and maybe the doctors can give us their thoughts.
I think that censorship is always something that an authoritarian dictatorship type government would want to when they want to prevent the dissemination of information. So rather than even trying to give a reason for the censorship, let's ask the millions of people out there that may be seeing this, why would anybody censor facts and truth about injury that's been caused by something that has been promoted for the last 20 or 30 years as the single most important safety component for our children, yet has caused more injuries, more documented injuries, millions of children being maimed worldwide? Why would you want to stop the conversation? That's the first question. And I'll give you a couple of reasons, but I think that's the first question that we have to ask. So I didn't realize this, and I think I know quite a bit about vaccinations, but I didn't realize this till I saw a presentation from my friend, Bobby Kennedy, who you had on recently, and actually Dell and a couple of other people have also talked about this, that in the 1980s, the vaccine industry came to Congress and said, we need help. We need to be bailed out, just like the real estate, the savings and loan crisis and the automotive crisis. The vaccine industry came in the 1980s and asked for a bailout. And the reason they needed a bailout was because of the number of people that were being injured by vaccines. And President Reagan at the time said this is not a good idea, but Congress went ahead and bailed them out. And the reason that they gave was, we have so many lawsuits, we cannot make vaccines, we cannot afford to be in business. So the government bailed them out, and the government then took over the oversight with a mandate that every 2 years they would do safety studies on different vaccines. Up to this point, 2020, now we're talking about 40, 50 years later, because this was like in the 70s and the 80s, let's just say in the last 40 years, guess how many safety studies have been done by the US government to assess the efficacy and safety of vaccines? I'll save you some time. 0. So the mandate that the government took over to do oversight has been totally ignored. Now, and it's not that they did it on purpose. I think they just, like the government, they dropped the ball. Now, how would you like to have a business where you can have no liability, and it doesn't matter how many people that you hurt, but there's no liability? Because now, let's say that I filed a lawsuit against a vaccine manufacturer. Guess who the defendant is on that lawsuit when it's filed with the government? The defendant is not that vaccine manufacturer. It's the HHS. It's the Health and Human Services. It's the US government that you're suing because of a vaccine injury. And guess who's defending the US government? The Department of Justice. So when you have a child that's been injured, you're fighting the Department of Justice, you're fighting the US government. And remember, the Department of Justice is supposed to be making sure that justice is being done. Instead, they are fighting to defend the Health and Human Services from somebody who's been injured. Now, does that make any sense whatsoever? That we are having to fight our own government because we've been injured by something that they've mandated that's being made by a company or companies that are vested in making unbelievable, god-awful amounts of money with no liability. So they can make garbage. They can inject horse manure into us, and they have no liability.
Yeah. So, yeah, and
that's the question.
So again, and then my question is I'd love to get the panel's thoughts about this censorship, because they get to see every day what's being put out in the media, and they get to see what's not being put out. So I guess my question is that do you think there is blatant censorship of real medical information that seems to be favoring a pro-vaccine agenda? That was my question. Is that a pretty good question?
I think it's a great question.
Okay, so raise your hand if you see blatant censorship that seems to serve a pro-vaccination agenda. If we just hold the hands up there. I'm just curious what this panel thinks. Okay, wow. All right. Okay, a lot of hands and thumbs up. Okay. What do you see here, Buttar? Dr. Buttar.
I see two people on the first page that don't have their hands up, but one of them is talking to somebody. So,
Okay.
Dr. Tucker, can you vote? Okay, Dr. Tucker says only one hand that's not up.
Okay.
On the first page.
So it's 1 in 10 or 20 that don't have their hands up, and everyone else does. So it's kind of 95% people believe there is the blatant censorship towards a pro-vaccination agenda.